So the trial of the century is it's basically reached its conclusion at this point, and there were a few notable events last week where there was an uproar over a perceived incongruence in Michael Cohen's testimony. You know, we had Ari Melber out here calling it a bloodbath when Cohen was being cross cross examined on this particular phone call in October of 2016, where he says he called Trump's bodyguard in order to speak to Trump, and it was to basically tell him he was going to green light the payment to Stormy Daniels, to keep her silent and to keep her story out of the public. And on cross, Trump's defense lawyer Todd Blanche brought up some text messages between Cohen and Keith Schiller, Trump's bodyguard. We was talking about this 14-year-old who was harassing him with phone calls and such, and they were like, aha, we got you. You didn't actually speak to Trump. This didn't have anything to do with the payments. You know, everything you said was a lie. It wasn't actually that dramatic. A lot of people in the courtroom said it was like, you know, it was like, okay, maybe you hit on something, but this didn't improve the entirety of Cohen's testimony here. And I think the media and Trump's lawyer, they made a big mistake in hedging the entirety of like Cohen's credibility on this one phone call, because if the idea was he's lying about this phone call, then he was lying about every single other bit of testimony, even the stuff that was corroborated by the evidence. And then, well, they were not prepared for the fact that earlier this week, upon redirect, the prosecution had the opportunity to dig up some pictures and video of Trump and Schiller together at a political event at the exact same time that these phone records suggest that Michael Cohen called. And it was like, poof, voila, there goes the defense argument. So now this corroborates Cohen's testimony, and as opposed to discrediting the entirety of his testimony, it basically made it seem as though everything he said was true. And this was, in the words of Ari Melber, a complete bloodbath, except for the defense this time. And I think one of the other takeaways about that is, well, specifically trying to attack the credibility of Michael Cohen and it make him seem like a terrible person and a piece of shit. Like, okay, that's a dangerous game you play again, because this is the guy who, when he was working for Trump, Trump said he was a great attorney, because they have, you know, endless mountains of evidence saying how, of Trump saying how great Michael Cohen was. And if you, the more you like slime Cohen, the worse you make Trump look.
Yeah.
So it's exactly just piss poor strategy on that part. But it actually got worse from there, because that went so poorly for Trump and the defense counsel, that I'm imagining Trump ordered his counsel to bring Robert Costello in to testify. He was the only witness to testify on behalf of the defense counsel.
What a shit show.
Yeah, total dumpster fire. So they bring Costello in. He's basically, a paralegal who worked for Trump, lawyer, paralegal, did paralegal work. And over the course of the indictment of Michael Cohen, he had done his best to try and recruit Cohen so he could represent him in this case. And I got to tell you, you guys have seen The Sopranos. This motherfucker was the most mobbed up looking ass lawyer you've ever seen in your life. Even more so than Phony Soprano that that represented Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case, that somehow managed to get that judgment down to $5 million before Alina Habba went on to cost Trump $100 million. But so Costello was in there off the rip, giving the judge a hard time, just saying smart ass shit back and giving him the stank eye and trying to stay him down, and the judge was not having it. I heard a number of people talk about how explosive of a moment this was, where the judge kind of lost it. And again, this is with Trump doing all this crazy shit and violating the gag order, and it's like a shit show with the defense counsel yelling at witnesses and shit. But at this point, the judge was like, "Get the fuck out of my courtroom," everybody but you guys.
Everybody get the fuck out.
All of yous, get out of here. I need to handle this. And apparently he had to straighten Costello out. And he was basically like, man, don't you ever try and stare me the fuck down.
Right?
You better
He
get
had
right.
to get him all the way together. He
Yeah.
was like, Are you are you are you staring me down?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out.
You looking at me like this? Yeah. No.
Come here. Look at me. Look at me.
Yes. I gotta tell you, look, I'm not a lawyer, but rarely have I ever heard of a judge emptying the entire courtroom to straighten out a witness like this. This is great. I've been in some courtrooms. I've seen some trials. I've seen some stern judges who don't put up with no bullshit. I ain't never seen nothing like this.
But that says also to me, it actually lends more credibility to Judge Marchand because he could have done that shit in front of everybody if it was about trying to posture, you know what I'm saying?
Well, to be fair, that if he had done that, that probably would have left it open for appeal upon a conviction. But yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like he could have, because if it was a Trump judge, they probably would have, they're, performing for an audience of one. But he was like, okay, we're gonna do this man to man. That's like, you remember when Officer and the Gentleman with Lou Gossett Jr. He was like,
girl,
okay, all right, we gonna do this. This is just you and me. I ain't got no stripes on right now. I'm not your sergeant. This is man to man.
Yeah,
we gonna handle this right now. Like that. Yeah. He was on some Louis Gossett Jr. shit. He was like, all right.
Yeah, the judge was not playing. Yeah, he Richard geared his ass. And then you got to think, like typically in a case where you feel like you're not going to put on a real defense, what you don't want to do, you basically just want to say, we feel so confident in the fact that the prosecution didn't meet its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt that we don't need to call any witnesses, the defense rests. But if you are going to put on a witness, in this case, where the cards are stacked against you, you're aiming for a home run. What you can't do is have that shit where the most absurd witness presented in the entire trial was the one that you brought up there on your defense. A witness where even like the jury is like, this is a clown show.
Right? When they were talking, I was listening to Midas Touch today, and they were like the faces on the drawers with some of the stuff that Costello was doing, and they were like, they were over it. They were over it.
Yeah, Carol. So legendarily, from everyone who's been in court over the past couple of weeks, they're like, this is one of the most straight-faced, stern juries they've ever seen. Like, they are there for business. They take this seriously. They get the weight of the moment. They don't break character. And for them dudes to be sitting there rolling their eyes at this guy, like just dramatic facial expressions and how ridiculous this shit is, like it's a wrap. It's a wrap for him. And again, this was more damaging. Just this, and I'm going to get to more in just a second, but this incident was more damaging to the Trump defense than if they had not called a defense witness at all.
Also, was Trump not supposed to testify in his own behalf today?
Getting that.
Oh, he's under a gag order, Carol.
Yeah.
Carol.
Hey, she's not a Karen. You take that back. But no, we'll get to that in just a second. But if you thought that was bad, it got even worse for Costello. Because when he was being cross-examined by the prosecution, actually, when he was being examined, he's being examined on direct by the defense counsel. He had testified that he had Cohen's interest in heart in representing Michael Cohen. And on cross-examination, Costello was presented with an email where he communicated with his law partner. That's in an email that said he was basically saying that Michael Cohen is slow playing, quote, us and the president. What should I say to this asshole? He's playing with the most powerful man on the planet. And this was in direct contradiction to Costello saying that he wasn't working on he wasn't working on Trump's behalf when he was president, that he was only trying to represent Cohen and look out for Cohen's direct interests. And now you've got this email that says the exact opposite. And then the prosecutor was like, the email speaks for itself, correct? And Costello's like, he basically has to concede, yes, it does. And then the prosecution rests after that. And this is the actual gotcha moment / bloodbath that Ari Melber and motherfuckers on CNN were talking about last week with Michael Cohen, where I was like, guys, relax. It's not that big of a deal. And plus, the prosecution will just be able to clean this up on redirect, which they did. They were able to rehabilitate Cohen's image. Nothing is bringing Costello back. It was a wrap after that. His testimony was contradicted in such a extreme fashion that when the judge gives the order to the jury, it's basically falsus in uno. If you find that a juror, rather a witness, has lied egregiously in one instance, then you can discredit the entirety of their testimony. That's going to apply to Costello here. So everything that he could have, whatever influence he could have made in a positive manner to help Trump's defense, that's all thrown out the window. But the jury's not going to forget how much of a fucking asshole he was and how he lied on the stand, and that was Trump's only defense witness.
I honestly think that it was Costello's behavior and his disrespect to the court, to the prosecutors, and his outright arrogance, his brazen arrogance, that turned the jury off more than anything else. Like, testimony notwithstanding, but his entire attitude and the way that he approached things, I think it made the jury feel some type of way, and it wasn't good.
No, he was everything that the media tried to paint Michael Cohen out to be.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, they tried to make Michael Cohen seem like this hothead and unserious and unprofessional behavior. And I tried to tell you guys last time on a podcast, y'all better be worried about y'all better respect Michael Cohen. No one spent more time testifying to prosecutors and at trial and before Congress in the last 4 or 5 years than Michael fucking Cohen. The dude knows what he's doing. Now you can talk about how you feel about his legal acumen. That's up for debate. I won't argue with you there. Given that, the work he was doing for Trump as a fixer, that part's not up for debate at all. But Michael Cohen can handle himself. And I try to tell you, and the people who were like quick to try and jump down his throat last week because, the media's got this thing where it seems like at every turn they're rooting for Trump to succeed. I was like, man, hold on, slow your horses. And then the very next week, you got Robert Costello up there engaging in all the antics that they wanted to portray Michael Cohen out to be, and he totally destroyed Trump's defense. And that's what them fuckers get for rooting for Trump in the first place. Everything, rooting for Trump's always going to come back to bite you in the ass. But also, Carol, as you were saying, Trump had been promising over and over that he was going to testify. And what do you know? He invoked his right.
And I read that he cried like a little bitch.
That he did.
Yes.
Well, Carol, in Trump's defense, it is cold in that courtroom.
So he says. Yeah.
Well, you can't talk when it's cold.
It is cold.
That's what he says, although that's up for debate. And if you hold on, if you give me 1 second, I have a video. That
was it Katie Fang or Stephanie Rule? She was like, it was quite warm today.
Yeah, everyone was talking about it. They were like, actually, it was like 73 or 75 degrees in there. The fact that he found this cold was very weird. But we also have some video here that might actually contradict what he was saying, and we'll play the clip.
To gain the respect back, we have to, either the appellate court has to step in, something has to happen. Think of it, the Republican Party, one of the two great parties, nominate somebody to be their candidate, and that candidate now has been sitting here for almost 5 weeks in a freezing cold icebox, listening to this stuff, no crime.
He looks very sweaty for a freezing cold man.
He is very sweaty.
Yes, for someone who was in a refrigerator, he was sweating his ass off. If you had the opportunity to see that video.
No, when I'm very nervous, I also sweat.
Even when you're freezing.
Well, it also could be the Adderall.
I don't know. I'm not usually both very nervous and cold at the same time.
Unless you're on amphetamines. But
maybe.
Yeah.
But yes.
Usually I don't have to spend a lot of time outside.
Yeah.
Well, he might have a reason to be nervous because the trial was going so poorly for him. But that was Trump claiming he had been in a refrigerator, yet he's like sweating like a fucking pig. Like he's drenched, covered in sweat. You know what he really looks like? He looks like the dude from Total Recall with like the bead of sweat drips down his head. And that's how Arnold Schwarzenegger knows he's not in a dream, and he blows his head off. Except this is like Trump's entire face is like dripping wet with sweat. But yeah, that's just, and that was absurd that he's claiming it's ice cold in there, yet he's like, he's drenched. It was pretty fucking disgusting. But also,
Maybe that's why he's so cold.
I mean,
Flop
I guess.
sweat.
It's probably sitting in his diaper. You know, it's
I guess
cold.
that's
all mushy and shit.
yeah. That was nasty, Ty. Nasty.
Sorry.
But also we have another clip from CNN that we'll play.
That's right. Well, my colleague Kristen Holmes and I are told that overall, when they're looking forward to this, whatever the verdict may be and whenever it may come, we're told that the former president is preparing for a potential conviction, at least on some of the counts. And that's largely because Donald Trump personally believes that the jury is biased. He has long believed, even before the trial began, that he could not get a fair trial in Manhattan, a mostly Democratic city. And so he's preparing for that potential option. Now, I'm also told that some of his attorneys are still considering, maybe this could be a hung jury. Of course, this is all speculation. But as for the former president, he is preparing for that potential outcome. Now, I also just
Yeah, of course he's preparing for a potential guilty verdict because the trial was fucking devastating. The evidence that was laid out against him was overwhelming. And now, again, predicting what juries will do, that's totally different from whether or not you feel like the prosecution met its burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Like the two aren't necessarily, there's a correlation.
I think they did that 115 witnesses ago.
Well, here's what I'll say about this. So a lot of people accuse me of just like being a Democratic shield. I'm in the bag for the Democrats, or I hate Trump. Some people on the left accuse me of selling hopium or whatever. But I feel like I try and call it fairly, reasonably. I try to be objective based on the information that's currently available. And I'll give you some examples of when I'm not selling hopium. So, it was like last year, November, December, where I basically said, just based on the evidence, that as long as Judge Cannon stayed on the classified documents case in Florida, that thing wasn't going to trial before the election. That was like 6 months ago. It was 6 months ago. I was telling you, hey, this thing probably ain't going to the trial before election. You listen to all these other political podcasts, and no shame at them. Like no shade at them, rather. I do actually want to be informed about the developments going on in the classified documents case. But, I was telling you months ago, this thing wasn't going to the trial before election. Hey, guess what we found out? Judge Cannon, she just rescheduled the trial. Well, she postponed it indefinitely. It ain't going to trial before the election. She's on the case. So, and look, above all, I'm rooting for Jack Smith to nail his ass. I'm a huge supporter of the work that Jack Smith and his team have been doing. And I was saying that unless they found a way to get her to recuse, it's curtains on that until 2025. Well, that's the case. There's also the instance where the Supreme Court basically put Trump back on the ballot in Colorado after he had been removed based on the Colorado Supreme Court decision to invoke the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And I was telling y'all, watch out for the Supreme Court. They're going to find a way to thread the needle so that they don't completely eliminate the insurrection clause of the Constitution, but they'll basically neuter it, and they'll find a way to get Trump back on the ballot. And guess what they did? They got Trump back on the fucking ballot. Was I selling hopium then? No. And I'm going to warn you again, in this case with presidential immunity, that the Supreme Court is likely to pull some fucking shenanigans and try and find a way to narrowly tailor presidential immunity in such a way that it bails Trump out for trying to overthrow the government. Now, they might have a little bit more of an uphill battle with that because of some recent developments that we'll get to later with, Judge Alito flying his freak flag. But I'm telling you now, I'm not out here sugarcoating this shit. I give my legit opinion, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, but I'm not out here sugarcoating anything. And with that said, Trump is fucked in this New York trial because the evidence was so overwhelming. Now, it's entirely possible maybe you get one juror on there who's like a hard, yes, I know, right? Maybe you get one juror that's a fucking hard ass, and like no matter what evidence is presented before them, and no matter what the other jurors say, that juror won't relent and you get a hung jury. That's possible. But in all likelihood, especially with a couple of lawyers on the jury, and again, people who are typically prosecutors, people who are prosecutors typically tell you, generally speaking, they don't want prosecutors on the jury because that makes it even more unpredictable. But I can tell you one thing, where having actual lawyers on the jury will help in this one regard, is specifically with the instance of Michael Cohen's billing, right? So he was an employee for the Trump organization. Why was Trump paying that man legal fees as a retainer when Michael Cohen was an employee? And these are lawyers who I'm sure totally, like Carol, you understand, as a lawyer, an attorney, a lawyer yourself, like you have an employment agreement with your company. What fucking sense would it make to pay you under a retainer? That wouldn't.
No, I mean, you don't have an employment agreement. Most people in most states in the U.S. are at will employment, and I do not have that. But yeah, I'm paid by my employer like any other employee.
Yeah. So why the fuck was Trump getting? Why the fuck was Trump paying Cohen as part of a legal retainer when he had an employment agreement? Well, there you go.
The IRS would wonder about that.
That's why we're here, Carol. And hence the indictment, because these payments weren't what the Trump organization claimed that they were, and they were actually reimbursements for not only Stormy Daniels, but also the tech company that Michael Cohen was using to rig those polls, which we don't have enough time to get into right now because, again, there's been so much going on. But long story short of it, based on the evidence, I believe the prosecution did their part and met their burden. And if they didn't, I would be the first one to tell you, hey, man, like Trump's going to get off. The prosecution blew it. Blame the prosecution. Can't say that. They did their job. They did their due diligence. They put on a hell of a prosecution, and they should come away with the conviction. Now, a lot of people are asking whether or not Trump is going to go to jail. 6 weeks ago, I would have told you probably not. As like there's no minimum sentence on any of these charges, even as felonies. I think it's anywhere from 0 months to 3 years at the max. But with Trump violating the gag order numerous times, like I think he's had like a dozen instances at this point, even though the judges so far only found Trump to have violated the gag order 10 times. He's since made comments about witnesses outside of the court, and I'm sure those will probably be taken up by the judge.
How many does he need to fill up his punch card?
12 violations of the gag order, and he gets the 13th one free. I think what's going to happen if Trump is convicted when it comes to the sentencing, that the judge is actually going to give him some time at this point, because I mean, like, the fucking shit that Trump's doing is absolutely outrageous. And the judge ain't stupid. He knows when he's having the entirety of Congress show up to say all the things about the witnesses and the trial and the judge's daughter that Trump can't say, that he's he's, ordering his surrogates to violate the gag order on his behalf, which is also a violation of the terms of the gag order. And I think it's that kind of behavior that's going to get Trump some prison time. And now I don't know when the sentencing hearing will be. I'm assuming after the verdict, if he's found guilty, it'll be within, 30, 45 days. And, the judge will hand down a sentencing if he gives him, 3, 6, 8, 12 months. It's entirely possible we could see Trump doing time before we even get to the election in November. Cross your fingers. Hope for the best.